2006, locals in the Mary Valley, 2 hours north of Brisbane, were shell-shocked when the Queensland government announced it was going to forcibly acquire nearly 500 farms, homes and businesses to make way for a $2 billion dam. Despite being told it was hopeless, the community fought back. And after 3.5 years of campaigning, it won, when the federal government knocked the proposal on the head. Canberra's decision left an embarrassed state government with a problem: how to return $500 million worth of property back into private hands without destroying land values and the valley's already weakened economy. Well, the last 10 properties are now finally under contract. And as I found out after spending some time there, the Mary Valley is coming back to life. For the last 2 years, Mary Valley locals have become as property obsessed as any Sydney sider.
Just what's the asking price, the reserve price from Lot 5 next door?
For every month, a dozen or so houses, shops, blocks of land and farms have been released onto the market.
They were small hobby farms, small acreage lots, up to major commercial dairy farms and so forth. So we had properties that were sold for $17,000, which were all landlocked and very small acreage, through to $6.5 million farms.
Each release got locals talking. Are prices up or down? Are the buyers locals or newbies? Investors or owners? Families or retirees? Hobby farmers or real farmers? And are they bringing jobs to the valley and kids for the schools?
If you just want to wander through the property, take your time, we're here for another half an hour or so. Matt's around the other side.
Sale by sale, family by family, business by business, a new community has been taking shape.
It's sort of like arriving at a party where nobody knows anybody. And, you know, everybody's been very lovely, but cautious.
It was a fairly run-down sort of area, but we've noticed in the last 6 or 8 months, there's a complete change in the demographic here.
There's so much energy and it's beautiful to be involved at the early stages of it all kicking back up. We weren't here when the proposed dam was happening, so we missed all of that.
What Sarah missed was a David and Goliath fight. A whole community against the state government and its premier.
We want to drought-proof the southeast corner and flood-proof Gympie. We're asking them to make a sacrifice in the interest of common good.
The dam would be a bloody disaster.
The way they've treated people is shocking.
We'll fight this right to the end.
We have to provide water. This is a matter of life and death.
The dam announcement left the community of the Fertile Valley enraged and bewildered.
I understand how people feel about this. I understand.
From a community engagement perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, it was a debacle at every level. Fourth generation people who had never even thought about selling their farm. Their only idea was ever passing it on to another family member. Suddenly we're faced with decisions that they just weren't ready to consider, and that just tore people apart.
You have not any idea of the human costs you are imposing upon us.
No amount of talk from the Premier or his deputy, Anna Bligh, could convince locals 14,000 hectares of land should be resumed so Brisbane could have water. The Mary Valley is 4 distinct little towns, starting with Dagon in the north, then tiny Ammermoor, then Kandanga, and in the south the biggest town of Imbil. The proposed $2 billion dam would drown Kandanga and cut the valley in half. Farmer Kevin Wheeler has lived here all his life and from the start couldn't work out why a shallow dam flooding prime agricultural land would be proposed when half an hour up the valley is this, the Barunga Dam.
Most people thought, well, raise Barunga Dam immediately, you know, and I mean, this place here, it's only a wall span of 1,125 feet and high mountains on either side.
Why was this a better option in terms of the humans that it would impact on?
Well, not one family they had to displace, you know, and on top of that, the government owned all the land that was going to be covered. It just common sense would tell them that it should be here. The people tried and tried to get the government to understand, but it just seemed like that they didn't want to listen.
The state government set about buying up land, resuming nearly 500 properties and securing the necessary approvals from its own departments. Some who sold to the government left the district. Others stayed and rented back their former homes and farms. The empty properties were rented out cheaply. Locals say their community changed for the worse.
Houses were totally wrecked. They were just shells standing there because the bloody thieves moved in and just ransacked the place and took everything that could be moved.
Prior to the dam, the productivity was amazing. You know, the farming that was going on, the produce that was going out, the money that was being turned over, the employment that was happening was quite amazing. Stopped like that.
People stopped spending money. They were going, you know, I'm not going to fix my fences. I don't own the property anymore. I'm not going to worry about putting down another crop because I'm not staying. And so in the whole region, the agricultural spend had declined quite dramatically. And then there was the flow-on effect. As families left, less children in the school. Once we got below a certain number, we lost a teacher in the school. You know, what do we need to do to keep that? So there was this real sort of multiplier effect.
Dairy farmer John Cochrane had seen this farm as an 11-year-old and told his grandfather he'd own it one day. He bought and sold farms until he could afford it. The news it would be resumed rocked him.
And I was just in the process of completing a new computerised dairy for $1,064,000. This one, yeah. It was absolutely devastation, heartbreak.
He sold his farm to the government and rented it back. While the rent was cheap, uncertainty about the future meant he sold his best cows.
We kept the bottom a few more than 10%, but we had to battle along. We couldn't do any capital improvements. You know, we weren't supposed to use poisons and sprays. So our whole management had to change. So you were trying to farm with your hands tied. Very difficult.
Did you feel the stress getting to you?
Oh, without doubt. Without doubt, I'm probably one that, you know, I suppose this is my judgment, but I handle stress a little better than others. But boy, there were times when, you know, you really got down, you had to really sit down and talk to yourself, if that sounds sense, and concentrate and dig in. And dig in it was. We dug in.
Did you feel the black dog of depression nipping at you?
Oh. None of us like to admit that. We all think we're a bit tough for that, but everybody did. Oh, it was horrible. And people did, I believe, through stress, pass on. And that was extremely sad. To lose your community. Now, you know, you hear all this and people go, oh, yeah, so what? But, you know, in the rural areas, you need to support one another.
The proposed flooding of the Kandanga cemetery alienated many. David Gibson, the local member at the time, says it was about lines on maps, not people.
And no one bothered to look as to whether that was over a cemetery or not. And I remember one example, one incident that, you know, a mother where, oh goodness, her son had drowned, and she was faced with the thought again of his his plot being covered in water, and that is just the cruelty of that. And I don't, it was never intended in any way, but it's just an example of when things get wrong, how terribly wrong they can get.
I had 28 relatives in the cemetery there, including our oldest son, and they just could not have cared. It was just so sad.
The government didn't count on people like beef producer Glenda Pickersgill.
We've been in the Mary Valley for a long time. I have been away and worked as well. I've worked in the mining industry in Western Australia, but it was almost my intention to come back and to farm in the Mary Valley.
She refused to sell her farm, certain the federal government would never approve the dam.
My land was never for sale. There were 15% of the proposed properties that were not acquired by the government. So 85% of the properties they did voluntarily acquire the land.
Glenda was president of the Save the Mary River coordinating group for the last 18 months of the fight.
I love the environment. I love the Mary River. As a teenager, I used to love to go and swim on the Mary River, and that was where I encouraged my parents to purchase a property here. I think the community, the people, the skills that people have there, the creativity, it's just a lovely place to live.
For 3.5 years, locals fought. A key part of their no dam argument were 3 endangered species.
The Mary River turtle, the Mary River cod and the Australian lungfish occurs in this stretch of the river. So we have some wonderful special creatures that we need to protect.
They weren't enough, though, to stop the state government approving the dam, albeit with 1,200 conditions.
This will make this dam the greenest dam ever built in Australia.
The final say, though, rested with Federal Environment Minister Peter Garrett. When he called a press conference to announce his decision, the Kandanga pub was packed.
It's my intention to say no to Traveston Dam.
It was better than winning the lottery. It was a sense of relief. It was a sense of justification.
People were screaming and running around and cartwheels, but that just goes to show you the amount of pain these people were under, the amount of stress they were under. But then when you wake up the next morning and say, we're going to rebuild all this, and then you realise there was another mountain in front of you, And for what? Tell me, for what?
Why had it taken so long? Why had we seen so much damage being done? Why had we seen our community suffered in such a way? But that's when the work really began.
The Queensland Government now had a problem. Getting rid of the 464 properties in the Mary Valley it didn't need anymore.
There's never been a sale like this ever undertaken in Australia. In terms of a government sell down of rural residential properties, it's been the biggest of its kind. The demand, we've had 3,500 inquiries in 20 months for 400 properties. We've completed over 2,500 inspections during that period, and we've made almost 320 sales.
It's been a delicate operation. If the market was hit with everything at once, property values would plummet. But release the land too slowly and it would hold back the local economy's tentative recovery.
In many ways, almost an impossible task, to look at. Bring back a community, bring back an economic foundation to that community, and to ensure that the land that the government held transferred back across into private ownership.
From the start, Brinton Keith says interest has been phenomenal. And when the open homes for the final 10 properties were held last month, inquiries and prices hit new highs. The state government paid pre-GFC prices. The sell-down will be lucky to recover half the $500 million that was spent.
for something that was worth $1 million then, you know, was probably, when we started this campaign, was probably worth $550, and now it's probably back to $850, $900.
So have some people had a real win with this?
Yep. There's been a lot of people who had a real win. Obviously, there was a lot of buyers who sold to the government and then stayed on their properties on a peppercorn rent, and then they've now been offered the property to buy back, and they've purchased that property.
A bucket load of money isn't enough to describe it, Pip. It's just, it's our taxpayers' money, and it is just absolutely shocking what they have done.
Local farmers Natalie and Gary Wheeler are glad the last properties are now under contract, giving a closure of sorts to a fractured community. A chance for the last of the empty houses to be fixed up and filled, and for empty weedy paddocks to be renovated and returned to agricultural production.
It is a relief. I think it is. It's all hopefully going to swing, go back to normal. We're going to hopefully produce more stuff here. So, yeah, I think it'll be good.
Gary and Natalie's farm was on the edge of the dam, so it wasn't in line for resumption. What they were going to lose was their local town of Kandanga and much of their community.
I am one of the fifth generation of this area, and it was shocking to see my great aunts and uncles have to move out of this area and never to come back.
To generate economic activity, the government implemented the Mary Valley Economic Development Strategy. It held back some land and aggregated titles into development leases, which it used to entice new businesses to the area. The big one everyone's talking about is Gina Rinehart's $500 million Hope Dairies project. More than 20 titles of good grazing land have been bundled together for her to buy so she can build what could be the country's biggest dairying operation, producing 150 million litres of milk a year from 16,000 cows. The milk would be processed into 30,000 tonnes of infant formula for export to China. Locals hope the infant formula factory will be built in the valley. If it goes ahead, it will mean nearly 500 jobs. What do you make of the Gina Rinehart plan?
Very, very interesting, Pip. I really honestly hope that it does go ahead for the whole industry, but I am a bit sceptical, really.
I think Gina and her associates have identified a strong market in China. I think they can afford good milk and they trust New Zealand and Australia's clean, green image. I think it is all possible.
Are you looking forward to having a beer with Gina at the Kandanga pub?
Yep, why not? Wonder what she shout.
This is what we've often referred to as the jewel in the crown of the Mary Valley. It's the Bligh Park property. It was a grazing property that was well established prior to the dam.
Just as ambitious is a $60 million plan for a quarter-horse racing operation on this $1 million property.
Never in our wildest dreams did we think that someone would come along and say, you know what, this would be a great place for quarter-horse racing and quarter-horse breeding. But it is. And, you know, when you look at it in that light, suddenly you go, gee, you know what, I can see a racetrack and I can see stables and I can see different things happening in this area. The important thing, I think, is whilst the quarter horse is by no means a done deal, it shows the vision that this area has attracted, that people have said, you know what, I want to do something. I want to do something new, brassy and bold, and this is a place in Queensland where I could do that.
Templeton's Ginger is Australia's biggest ginger grower. When the dam was announced, Shane Templeton had just built a new family home. He sold it to the government.
That was a place we planned to bring up our kids and things like that, and we were pretty much told to move on.
He was able to buy back into the valley with a development lease, but didn't go for the old farm, opting instead for 3 titles packaged up into a 220-hectare lot.
It was a godsend for us because we were struggling with Pythium as a disease at that time, so it gave us the ability to get on fresh ground and have a good rotation with good water and good land.
The family employs up to 20 people here and now has room to grow. Taking advantage of the valley's agricultural revival are Tim and Amber Scott, who started a new rural merchandising business. Once the weed problem's fixed up and people, get all the basics done, what do you think the potential of this land is?
Oh, it's massive. It's I think it's 45 or between 40 and 45-inch rainfall here, and it's got soils that you could grow nearly anything on, and a lot of these places have irrigation on them. This one's got a lot of irrigation on it, so it's as good as you can get, really.
The Scotts bought a rundown 60-hectare property with 3 houses on it. They're running cattle and the houses have all been renovated. They live in one with their 2 children, another's rented, and their business is based in the third. They're aiming for a staff of 16.
We're hopefully going to prove to some people that it's you're better off being based regionally than you are in the city to develop the type of businesses that we're in, so we'll give that a bit of a crack. One of the big things is we're only 150 k's from the Brisbane airport, and we're close to the coast if we want to go to the coast, but still got all the advantages of being living in paradise.
The development leases have attracted some unusual businesses. This property had been derelict for 15 years until it was taken up by an outdoor education company.
We had a contract out of Hong Kong. We needed a third property, and it's near to and adjoins a property that we already have. It was very run down. It had to be totally refurbished, and since we've taken over, there'd be 10 to 15 jobs that are local people in some way, shape or form. We buy all our supplies, groceries, food from the area. People have moved to the area, people have bought houses. In a small way, there's been a little bit of a ripple effect. People who have moved into the area, some of our staff are in the Rural Fire Brigade or in the local clubs.
Another business hiring staff is Botanicals Australia, a medicinal herb and rare plant seed business which has relocated from the Lockyer Valley.
I've got a pile about that many of resumes on the desk at the moment, and some are qualified people that can be of assistance straight away, but then there's other people that do require training.
Mark and Pauline Beaumont weren't after a lot of land, it just had to be steep. And this weed-infested block was perfect.
With the range that we grow, it's really necessary to have. We can create 100 different microclimates, because we can here.
In 2 years, they hope to have planted more than 500 plants, bulbs, trees and herbs.
And instead of $2,000 or $3,000 an acre, we work on $2,000 or $3,000 a square metre, which I know it sounds, but it works out that way. But from 1 square metre, we'll get maybe 60 or 70 grams of radium wheat seed.
And how much a gram is radium wheat?
It's $150 a gram. While the market in a lot of ways is niche, opening up to the world the way the internet's allowed us to do means that even niche is big.
We export all around the world, particularly Europe, so throughout the Netherlands, Germany, everywhere basically throughout Eastern and Western Europe, Japan, China, the Americas, New Zealand, everywhere.
From one niche business to another, with Premium Greens Australia attracted to the valley as much by the soil and rainfall as the government's development lease. The Queensland company has commercialised the Australian native umbrella fern, and this 12-hectare farm was perfect for a nursery.
There is no other foliage product that gives that unique umbrella-like arrangement of fronds perpendicular to the stem. So it really just gives florists a different, sort of platform to start building from, especially for bouquet arrangements. At
the moment we do a lot of wild harvest, which is why we're trying to be more sustainable and move out of the forest to protect the forests. And so by artificially cultivating it, we'll actually be able to meet demands better.
Emily was a finalist in this year's Rural Woman of the Year award, recognised for her breakthrough work in commercialising the tricky fern. The Valley is lucky to have fellow finalist Elaine Bradley also driving its new agricultural economy.
The Mary Valley is a mosaic of land types, and much of the area lends itself to small crop farming rather than large commercial production types. So you're more likely to see a patch of 1 or 2 acres here or there rather than, say, 20, 30 acres of a particular crop going in.
Elaine set up a co-op to provide training, advice and markets for small crops farmers like Trish and Bruno Cabana, who grow nearly 60 different fruits, vegetables, herbs and nuts.
They've been farming for nearly 40 years, and now they're doing it on a smaller scale, but only on a small parcel of land. Again, they've only got about 2 acres actually under production, and they're doing well.
By selling direct to the customer, Elaine says co-op members can make a good income from their small holdings. There's a growers market here on the Dagan train platform every Saturday, and on Thursdays, farmers drop off and pack produce boxes for the co-op's customers, for which there's a long waiting list.
The advantages of that is that we can have stuff that's basically it's pre-sold. So today we're packing 38 different types of fruits and vegetables, which is quite good for this time of year.
Herb grower Sarah Davis is a new arrival to the Valley.
We're growing basil and coriander and a few other herbs. Also, we grow in a big tunnel house, and so we're doing some Lebanese cucumbers and tomatoes. So we're just starting out having a go.
Has the co-op been helpful?
Extremely. There's been a huge wealth of information. They run a summer school once a year, which we went last year and this year, and they have farm walks once a month. It's just been so good to learn from all the experienced growers.
Elaine Bradley doesn't want small crops farmers making peasant incomes, as profitable farms will make for a healthier community, which she says is coming back to life.
There's always been this strong groundswell of community around all through the Mary Valley, and it's heartening to see that the schools are getting a higher number of kids again, and we're seeing more people come along to social occasions that we're running.
Are the scars still a bit raw, or have people moved on?
Depends on the people. I think you have to move on, but the scars will always be there.
There's obviously still a small amount of people that are always going to be upset by the decision that was made nearly 10 years ago, and that's probably never going to change in their mind. But I think if you walk down the main street of Kadanga or Imbil or any of the local communities and ask 10 people, I think 8 or 9 of them would say, yeah, no, it's going in the right way.
I've got some wonderful neighbours that have come in here that have brought new skills and new ideas to the Valley. So there's some good that's come out of it. It's strengthened the networks we had in the Mary Valley even before the announcement. I think community has been a very, very important part of the healing process here.
Next week on Landline, another rural community fighting back. This time I go to the tiny town of Felton, which took on the miners and won.
That's all in the past, coal mining. This is the future, food and future generations in farming.
The beating heart of this festival is about the community saying, we love our landscape, we want to keep it farmlands, we stand up for it.